Irene.
My name is Ethan.
And today we'll be taking you through Beethoven's Tempest. So this will be the section 1 of a series of music appreciation talk about Beethoven's Tempest Sonata number 17. We will begin with a brief introduction on the original Beethoven Sonata and the Shakespeare play. Ethan will take us through the live music period of Beethoven, and then after that, I will talk to you about Shakespeare, his life, era, and play, and exactly why do we care about Shakespeare in the context of analyzing Beethoven. I hope by giving these historical lessons, we can gain a bit more appreciation of what Beethoven put into the sonata and be able to better comprehend elements in the sonata as well as what they perhaps represent and what Beethoven himself was perhaps thinking about as he's writing this piece. So we have split this session up into two sessions, one today and then another on August 3rd, this upcoming Wednesday, exact same time, exact same location. You can join us in person or on Zoom, and that's when we will talk about the next 2 bullet points here on the timeline. We will go over a music analysis, looking at both the musical structure and elements of the Beethoven Sonata number 17, as well as looking at some of the story plot as about how Beethoven might have perhaps incorporated part of the Tempest play by Shakespeare into his music. And that will be followed by a performance by me and Ethan on this very sonata.
All right, so first I'd like to introduce to you guys what we're going to be doing today. First, we'll be taking a look at Tempest and the people who contributed to the creation of it, Beethoven and Shakespeare, and breaking down their roles in creating the story and the piece itself. We will also be going into a deep dive of Tempest next session on August 3rd to shine light on Beethoven's brilliance and break down his masterpiece by going through his song, breaking it down step by step, and analyzing important sections of the song. I'm pretty sure most of you guys know who Beethoven is. Beethoven is a widely known piano virtuoso, famous for his unique and masterful compositions. He was an inventor that dived into the deeper end of the pool and created monumental music in the classical era that would spark a new era of music. Many even consider Beethoven's death to mark the upcoming Romantic era, and even though he did suffer hearing loss later in his life, he would continue to create timeless pieces that would be played for generations to come. Next, I'd like to introduce you guys to the classical period, which was the period where Beethoven lived. So the classical period lasted from 1750 to 1830. During this time, music deviated from the Baroque period in the sense that instead of having overly complex texture, the music was much more simple and focused on elegance more than anything. However, not everything was as lenient. For example, most of the music in the classical era was made to follow strict forms of music, such as concertos or symphonies. Two famous examples include the well-known Mozart and Haydn, which were textbook examples of what classical music was to be like. However, Beethoven, as he grew more and more accustomed to composing, would overstep the boundaries of classical music, making unique changes no one else in the classical era dared to do. Beethoven would continue experimenting with formal, harmonic, and structural elements. His unique style comes from his especially mature developments of music that would play around with modulation and previous motifs. All of this would ultimately form one of the most iconic forms of music known to man, created by Beethoven. Next, I'll be talking about Beethoven's life and influence. So first of all, let's talk about his life. So Beethoven is the eldest and only surviving child of Johann Maria Magdalena van Beethoven. He was born on December 17th, 1770 in Bonn, Germany, and died on March 26, 1827. He was born into a family of musicians and started playing the piano ever since he was 5 years old. He also played multiple other keyboard instruments, including the harpsichord, clavichord, organ, and even played the viola and the violin. Next, I'll be talking about his influence over music. Beethoven's symphonies revolutionized the entire craft itself. From never before heard of harmonies, meaningful phrasing, and the unique usage of instruments and even voices, Beethoven has pushed beyond the boundaries of previously believed limits of orchestra. Beethoven's symphonies only show a fraction of Beethoven's brilliance. His innovative compositions Beethoven created were incredibly unique on many levels. As mentioned before, he was able to create much more profound and emotional work, most commonly sought after by the following Romantic era musicians. Instead of following the strict form the classical era imposed on his musicians, Beethoven would break free from the shackles of the classical era. This would become more and more prominent in his later works, which express the sentiments of his character instead of using the musical structure of composers such as Mozart or Haydn. Beethoven's witty innovations allowed him to surpass most of the composers of the classical era, revealing the potential of how much more music could be discovered and created. His music was ahead of its time with all the rules and records he broke throughout his career. Following his lead, younger composers would follow in Beethoven's lead into a new era of music, which is the Romantic era. However, Beethoven's influence does not only stop there. His legacy still holds on even in today's world, despite the huge time gap between them. The legacy he created still finds its way into current society, even finding its way into pop culture, such as remixes of his classic work, like Beethoven Virus, a remix of his Sonata No. 8 in C minor, Opus 13, Pathétique. His music was able to transcend its time, and many musicians today still consider Beethoven as one of the best and greatest of all time. Alright, so now I'll be introducing a little bit of Tempest and its correlation with Beethoven's life. So Tempest was made around 1801 and 1802, near Beethoven's middle life. Although quite popular, Tempest would still be overshadowed by the following Waldstein and Appassionata sonatas. However, this piece would still hold a place in Beethoven's heart due to the circumstances arising around the time he made the song. So around 1796, as we have told you before, Beethoven's hearing was getting worse, and his condition wasn't getting any better either, which made Beethoven nervous. After all, he was a musician that relied on his hearing more than anything, and he would continue to keep this a secret from the public, afraid that exposing the secret would result in him basically crashing his career. And around 1802, when Beethoven was depressed, he finally addressed the public in a letter that seemed as if Beethoven was considering suicide. In this letter, Beethoven blamed his doctors for deceiving and sabotaging his career. However, we know that Beethoven would continue on his life, giving us more beautiful works amidst this crisis. So next, I'll be talking a bit about other Beethoven works aside from Tempest. And although Beethoven's pieces are all great in their own right, today I'll only be focusing on a select few from his amazing roster. To start it off, we'll be talking about Beethoven's symphonies. Symphonies are lengthy pieces that are written for an orchestra. And so has anyone heard of Ode to Joy? Yeah, thank you for participating. It's a symphony written by Beethoven. So I'll start off with symphonies. So Beethoven has been able to utilize the orchestra to great lengths and manipulate it in a manner no one has ever done previously. For example, his Third Symphony, which was originally dedicated to Napoleon, was able to break free of many constraints from previous symphonies and managed to shrug off much of the classical influence from composers such as Mozart. His Fifth Symphony was also able to break multiple firsts in music history, such as adding trombones and even repeating music from previous movements. In his Ninth Symphony, which he wrote in his later life, Beethoven even added a chorus to the piece that sang the Ode to Joy most of us recognize, which was a never-before-seen addition to the orchestra that revolutionized symphonies forever. So next, Beethoven's talent did not only show in symphonies. His sonatas were just as widespread and well-known as his symphonies, if not more. His ability to create music that can be sorrowful or energetic, simple or profound, shows his excellent mastery over the form of sonata. Through his sonatas, one may be able to see the world through Beethoven's eyes and watch as his sonatas evolve in his musical ability to express himself. Beethoven has multiple groundbreaking and widespread sonatas, one of which is the Pathétique Sonata. The sonata covers many of the classical elements, which, while showing Beethoven's own flair, with magnificent themes that even inspired Billy Joel's track This Night. The Pathétique Sonata is one of Beethoven's most important earlier sonatas. Moonlight Sonata is another famous sonata many of us recognize, dedicated to Beethoven's lover. This sonata has beautiful melodies that captivate most listeners quickly. Other important sonatas include the heroic Waldstein Sonata, which was played so often even Beethoven regretted making it, and the beautiful yet simple Appassionata Sonata. Although Beethoven suffered from poor health and hearing loss in his later life, as we discussed before, he would find motivation to create his magnum opus of sonatas, the Hammer Clavier Sonata. This sonata showcases the peak of Beethoven's progression in finding his own path. With beautiful and heart-wrenching melodies, the sonata is an extremely large and complex piece that showcases Beethoven's in-depth mastery of the sonata and understanding of music. From following in the footsteps of Mozart and Haydn to paving the way to our future romantic era, Beethoven finally found his own type of music.
Thank you so much, Ethan, for that lovely introduction on Beethoven. Next, we'll be talking about Shakespeare. So, why exactly do we need to talk about Shakespeare when we're analyzing a Beethoven sonata? So, the story goes that Beethoven and one of his friends are very, very much Shakespeare's lover. So after Beethoven wrote Sonata number 17, this friend asked him, "So, well, Beethoven, how should I go about analyzing your sonata?" Beethoven famously replied, "Well, go read Shakespeare's Tempest." So this is why, even though Beethoven himself never named his sonata number 17 the Tempest, people later started to give it its name because of this story. So next, I will try to contextualize you about Shakespeare's life as well as his play and see if this story can help us better understand what might be the underlying plot in this sonata and why exactly did Beethoven tell his fellow friend to go read The Tempest. So, raise your hand if you've ever read a Shakespeare poem or play before. Yeah, so most of you will as you go into your high school year and take literature classes. Shakespeare is one of the greatest writers of the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. He is an English poet, playwright, and actor of the Renaissance era, which lasted between the 15th and 16th period before Baroque and the classical period that we learned in our theory class. There are no official birth record for Shakespeare. However, one church has a record that indicates one William Shakespeare was born at Holy Trinity Church in Stratford upon Avon on April 26, 1564. So this is his baptized record. From there, historians are able to predict that his birthday is around April 23rd, 1564. And he died, very unfortunately, on his own birthday in 1616. Also from this record, we know that Shakespeare's hometown is at Stratford upon Avon, England, and he is the son of a wealthy merchant as well as mayor. So, coming from this background, he must have been able to gain an education at the local school where he would be taught basic stuff such as grammar and writing. However, we are able to find very few records of his education as well as his early life until he showed up in a playing company at London. So because of this relatively few record about him, many people have started to question the authorship of his plays as well as whether or not Shakespeare really existed. What we know mostly about Shakespeare is after he arrives at London, where he joined a playing company called the Lord Chamberlains. With this company, he played for Queen Elizabeth and quickly became one of her favorite. Queen Elizabeth would eventually become the patron who sponsored a lot of his work. After the death of Queen Elizabeth and the coronation of King James, the company changed their name to the King's Men, and Shakespeare was able to once again win the love of this new royalty with his play King Lear. His well-known work can mostly be categorized into three categories: comedies, tragedies, and history. Comedies is what he wrote mostly in his earlier career, with the most famous being A Midsummer's Night Dream, as well as The Tempest, which I will talk to you a bit later. Tragedies is what perhaps what Shakespeare is well known for, a series of misfortunate conflicts which ends in the death of a lot of her main characters. Examples being Hamlet, the love story between Romeo and Juliet, this play, as well as the music. Actually, a lot of us I know have analyzed it before in our theory class. King Lear, which is what the top picture on your right shows, as well as Macbeth, which is what the bottom picture shows. Histories are plays that states historical facts. It tells the story of previous people. So, for example, Shakespeare wrote for the English King Henry IV, Henry VI, as well as Henry VII. After his death, two of his friends compiled all of his plays except for two of them into a book called The First Folios. This is in this book. It's through this book that Shakespeare was able to gain a lot more fame after his death, since this book contains half of the plays that Shakespeare never published. So it's also in this book that the author famously described as Shakespeare as not of an age, but for all time. We cannot possibly learn about Shakespeare without knowing the style that he wrote in. Just like how Beethoven, as well as other classical composers, wrote in sonata form, Shakespeare wrote his poems in what's called the Shakespearean sonnet, because named after him, since he was one of the lead person inventing this structure. It's also called the English sonnet because it's written in the English language as opposed to the Italian sonnet, as well as Elizabethan sonnet, for it was composed during Queen Elizabeth's era. A sonnet composed of 14 lines, and a Shakespearean sonnet has 3 quatrains, quat for 4, so 3 paragraphs that contains 4 lines each, as you can see on the spacing of this very lovely poem that I found online, which is not written by Shakespeare, but is a wonderful example of how a Shakespearean sonnet works. After the 3 paragraphs, you have one ending couplet, which is a pair of 2 rhyming lines. The rhyme scheme is ABAB, as well as the rest of what you see here color-coded, and all sonnets are written in what's called the iambic pentameter form, as well as some of Shakespeare's other plays as well. Iambic pentameter, pent for 5, meter for foot. A meter or foot means a pair of 2 syllables. Iambic tells you the rhythm that you should read these 2 syllables. Unstressed, stressed. So if we look at this very famous line from one of his poems, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? If we divide it according to iambic pentameter, we read it like this. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? I will then read the first 2 quatrains of the sonnet right here, and then you can see how really masterful this structure is, as it really rolls off the tongue as people or the actor reads it, and it sounds very musical to the audience ear. The sonnet form is old and full of dust, and yet I want to learn and write one well. To learn new forms and grow is quite a must, but I will learn it quickly, I can tell. And so I sit today with pen in hand, composing 3 new quatrains with a rhyme. The rhyme flows like when at my command, the ABA form consumes my time. So you can go ahead and read the rest of the poem, and at this point I would like to ask if anyone has a question on anything that's been said so far. If not, we will go on to the next slide. So as you you can see, poems, just like sonatas, have their form, and these forms help make the poem sound better to the audience ear. On the right here, you see is a picture of the Globe Theater. This is where most of Shakespeare's plays were performed. The Globe Theater is very strategically located on the southern bank of the Thames River, right across from London, England. This allows many London residents to easily cross the river, maybe on a day after work, to watch one of Shakespeare's plays. The theater has an open-air design and is built as a large round theater. There is a roof around the circumference which covers the seating area, leaving the theater looking like a donut from above. On the circumference are 3 stories of rooms called suites. These rooms are reserved for the theater's more wealthy audience, since these suites are usually more expensive. However, they're also more comfortable, they give more privacy, and so they are a very popular choice as well. In the center here, in front of the stage, is a section called the pit, which held groundlings, people who paid as little as 1 penny to stand and watch the performance. So this is what makes watching a Shakespeare play a very successful form of entertainment for people of his time. At the peak of summertime, the groundlings were also referred to as steamtards, for reasons that may well be very obvious. At summertime, this section can become very hot, very crowded, thus very smelly, and with people drinking, and the Hamlet play taking a notoriously 4 long hours to read, people are known to faint during these plays as a result of standing for too long. Finally, if we look at the last section of the theater, this is a stage where the actors will perform the play, and they will be able to change behind the backdrops. Shakespeare was a shareholder who held 12.5% of the Globe Theater. At the peak, the theater can hold up to 3,000 people every performance. So as a result, as you can imagine, Shakespeare was able to grow very wealthy as a result from it. However, even though he was wealthy, he does not incorporate a lot of characters into his plays. There were no actresses performing at the Globe Theater or any other stage at the time, in fact, because the theater is considered too risky of a place for ladies to be working at. As a result, female roles are always acted out by male boys wearing a wig. And because Shakespeare doesn't like hiring a lot of actors, in some of the plays, such as King Lear, some of the roles in the play are actually designed so that one person can act out 2 different roles. They would be able to swap their costume backstage in between, and that can help Shakespeare save money, I guess. Today, if you visit London, you are still able to watch an original Shakespeare play in the Globe Theater. And for as little as a penny, you're still able to get those very cheap tickets at the pit, and that will allow you to experience what some of the London residents did during the 1600s. Alright, last we will talk about the Tempest. So as Ethan mentioned, the Tempest was written in a time where Beethoven is already experiencing hearing loss, anxiety, and confusion about what he should do in the future. And I do think the Tempest, with its quite dramatic plot, kind of captures Beethoven's emotion and sense of hopelessness during this rough time. So the Tempest is categorized as a romantic comedy. It's a comedy since it contains many funny and ironic elements in the play. Romantic, not because it has a love story. Even though The Tempest does, in fact, have a love story of a young man and a young woman, this romantic actually refers to the Romanticism literature style, which has a focus on human nature and dramatic spirits. The Tempest was published at on November 1st, 1611, and is one of the last plays that Shakespeare wrote alone. As you can see from the date, this is 5 years before his death. The play is set on a Mediterranean island and explores the theme of greed, magic, and forgiveness. Like I mentioned before, Shakespeare's plays do not have a lot of actors. As you can see, I've listed our main characters. They belong to 3 main families: Prospero, Miranda, and Antonio being one. Ariel and Caliban are the original residents of the island that everyone lands on, as well as Alonso, Ferdinand, Sebastian belonging to the royal family. Okay, so let's talk about the summary of the story of The Tempest and what exactly happened. Since we will not be playing the actual piece until next Wednesday, I would like it if you're able to remember some of the plots that I will soon cover, and remember them for Wednesday when me and Ethan will be performing part of the sonata for you, and you will try to see if you can hear the story that I am about to tell you in the sonata. Oops. Little spoiler. Alright. So the play begins on a ship in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. On that ship, you have Alonso, the king of Naples, Ferdinand, his son and the heir of the kingdom, Sebastian, Alonso's other son, but not the heir of the kingdom, as well as Antonio, who is Prospero's brother and the current Duke of Milan. They are returning home via this ship. They just visited a marriage at a nearby kingdom. However, on the ship, while they're returning home, they encountered this storm, and unfortunately, their ship was destroyed. So now let's shift to our next place. On an island nearby, still in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, Prospero, the protagonist of our story, who is a former Duke of Milan, watches the play with Miranda, his daughter. Miranda is a very, very nice girl. Seeing these people crashing, she is heartbroken. She asks her father, "Are you able to save these people?" Prospero then tells Miranda, its daughter, "It's time for me to tell you what happened 15 years ago to your poor father." Actually, it turned out the very people on that ship, Prospero's brother, the king of Naples, are responsible for disposing Prospero from his dukedom in a coup about 15 years ago. So after that, Prospero lost his land, and only with the help of a kind servant, he was able to escape via a boat with young Miranda and a magic book. It's from this boat, he then travels onto this island where he and Miranda has lived ever since. Remember the magic book that he carried with him? Well, this magic book actually taught him magic and gave him power, even though he has lost all of his power back home, as well as his land, his money. So while on this island, Prospero saved a spirit, Ariel, from a trap on a tree where she is left to die. As a result, Ariel becomes Prospero's very loyal spirit helper. The other person we have here is Caliban. He is a mooncalf, was originally on this island. After Prospero arrived, he then enslaved Caliban and Caliban does not like this at all. We will talk about it later. So Prospero then tells Miranda, I am actually the person behind this shipwreck. I wish to bring everyone together onto this island and use this opportunity to kind of talk to them about their past and take this to talk to them face to face. So what happens next? Just like how Prospero promised to Miranda, these people are unharmed. Everyone was able to arrive onto the island safely. However, Ferdinand, remember the son of Alonso, arrived on a different part of the island from everyone else. Alonso, not seeing his son, is very, very extremely scared and sad. He believed that Ferdinand had drowned and had not been able to escape the shipwreck. But actually, Ferdinand is very safe on the other side of the island where he meets Miranda, the daughter of Prospero. The children of two enemies, they meet and they quickly fall in love. Well, you see, Ferdinand is actually the third male character that Miranda has ever seen, besides her father and the moon calf. So this kind of reminds you about one story, doesn't it? In Frozen, Anna sees the prince, who is also one of the female characters. But don't worry, unlike Frozen, Miranda and Ferdinand do have a happy ending. Prospero then appeared. As you can imagine, Prospero, like Elsa, does not like this a bit, because after all, he is enemy with Ferdinand's father, right? So he tries to separate them and then talk with Ariel. Ariel asks Prospero for her freedom. Prospero promises to free her after she helped them with one last task. Next. So, if you remember from the before, the play also explores a theme of greed. Greed from those who doesn't have power, such as the servants, as well as Sebastian, who, if you remember, is the son of Alonso but not the heir to the kingdom. Two groups. First group, Stefano, Caliban, and Tranquillo. They wish to kill Prospero so they can take over the island. Second group, Sebastian and Antonio. They wish to kill King Alonso while he is very, very incredibly sad about the loss of his son, so they can take over the kingdom of Naples. Ariel, little spirit, flies by. Here, in Transpirit, she hears their plan and warns Prospero ahead of time. So as a result, these 5 people did not succeed. Last thing, remember this is a comedy play, not a tragedy. So ultimately, we do have a happy ending. In the end, Prospero asks Ariel to round everyone up. Perhaps it's because seeing the love between Miranda and Ferdinand, Prospero decides to forgive everyone. He appears in front of everyone, renounces his magic, and accepts the return of his dukedom without punishing anyone. The servants, they were drunk and they thought their own ending. Miranda and Ferdinand were able to happily get betrothed. The sailor comes in and tells everyone is safe. The ship is safe for everyone to board and go home. There is a happy reunion, and at the very end, Prospero goes about to the audience, famously in an epic love, and asks the audience to forgive him for all of his wrongdoings by applauding. So ultimately, Prospero, even though he does have that magical power, he did not use it to seek revenge to those who has taken his power away, and he used love instead to forgive everyone and give everyone a happy and safe ending. So that is the story of the Tempest. Do you remember the 5 major things that happen in the play? We will be trying to correspond these story points with what's in the motives in our sonata to see whether it's really the Tempest story that Beethoven is trying to tell through his sonata. It's 5:05 right, 5:08 right now, and I think we have time to cover 2 more slides. So next we will talk a little bit about sonata form. I know some of you are probably very familiar with sonata form from CM exams, but for some of our younger students, I would like to give everyone one more reminder about what a sonata form consists of and some of the elements that we will be looking for while we're doing demonstrations on Wednesday. A sonata is a package of 3 to 4 songs, each song being a movement, and a movement being an individual self-standing songs that can be played either alone, or together with the rest of the songs in movements in that sonata as a package together. An entire sonata usually lasts between 30 to 40 minutes. A Beethoven sonata usually consists of 3 to 4 movements. We always start with a fast movement, an allegro, which follows the sonata allegro form. Sonata allegro form will be explained a little bit later, and we will also be looking at it in the Tempest sonata on Wednesday, as well as how actually it applies to some of the other movements, such as Isa's movement 3. The allegro movement, fast, is followed by a slow movement. You can already kind of see what part of the Tempest plot might fit in a slow song, right? What part is fast? What part could be slow? So this is a slow adagio movement that is followed by an ascending movement. This movement can either be a scherzo or a minuet dance. So Tempest actually only have 3 movements. So this optional movement does not exist for Tempest, but it does for some of the other sonata. Finally, we always end with a fast movement. So fast, slow, fast. This is usually allegro or presto, even faster. Movement 1 is where we have that sonata allegro form, the most strict form. We start off with an introduction, followed by exposition. So movement 1 is in a rough ABA format where we end with very similar themes as what we start with. So exposition, Art A, start with theme 1. So first theme, first motivation, first theme that happens, theme 1. It is played in tonic 1 key, your home key. So for example, if the piece is in F major, we start off in F major. Theme 1 is followed with a bridge, which connects theme 1 to theme 2. Theme 2 is in a related key. The most commons are dominant key, 5, so if it's F major, it goes to D major, your relative major or minor, or your parallel major or minor. After theme 2, it is followed by an optional transition that lead to our section B, development, where you have motives that's based on theme 1 and 2 that are further developed in various keys. Lastly, we have our A prime section. A prime, since it's still similar to exposition, but we have developed. A prime section is usually a bit harder or have a bit more voices than your exposition. So recapitulation is, again, you go play that theme 1 again, same theme 1 as the beginning, also still in that tonic 1 key. So if we begun with F major, it's still F major. Theme 1 is followed by that same bridge and then a theme 2. This time theme 2, instead of going to a related key, it sticks to your home key, your tonic 1 F major. Lastly, we finish this off with a coda. A coda means a tail in Latin. So a coda is a passage at the end of a piece that brings the music to an end. So again, remembers are these terms: exposition, development, recapitulation, and we will be exploring how these three sections show up in the Tempest Sonata. I think that will be it for the information that we will cover today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we hope to give you a contextualization, whether it's about Beethoven, the context that he wrote under, Shakespeare, what a possible framework of plot that Beethoven might have written in, as well as a more detailed explanation of the sonata form, which is a structure that Beethoven does indeed stick to, even though he is veering off to Romanticism. He still uses the sonata form. So do remember the contextualization aspect, and we hope that this part of music appreciation will help us better understand Beethoven's Sonata number 17 when we perform it to you on Wednesday, and it will give you a better understanding of how the piece was composed and how we should go about to interpret and listen to the piece. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again Wednesday, again, same time, same location. We will be covering we're doing a demonstration at the piano as well as a performance.